The wind in Redemption Valley did not shout. It waited. It circled the town like a patient hunter, lifting thin sheets of dust from the dry road and pressing them against every window, every door, every tired face. It was the kind of wind that did not knock a man down. It wore him down. It filled his lungs and settled in his bones until even hope felt heavy. Inside the Silver Spur Saloon, the air was thick with smoke and sweat. Lamps burned low, their yellow light casting long shadows across warped wooden floors. Men hunched over their drinks as if the glasses held answers instead of whiskey. Spurs clinked. Cards slapped against tables. Laughter rose in rough bursts, then died just as quickly. On the small stage near the back wall stood a woman named Clara Belle Monroe. She was not yet 30, but hardship had carved quiet lines around her mouth and eyes. Her dark hair was pinned high, not for beauty, but for survival, to keep it from falling into her face while she worked. She wore a deep red dress, the fabric worn thin at the seams, the neckline daring enough to draw coin from lonely men, but modest enough to keep her from feeling entirely exposed. It was armor disguised as silk. Her voice filled the room. It was not sweet. It was not gentle. It was rough with memory. Every note carried the weight of roads walked alone and promises broken in the dark. She sang of cattle drives and lost brothers, of men who rode east and never came back. The room grew quieter as she sang, not because the men respected her, but because they recognized something of themselves in her pain. They looked at her the way men in towns like Redemption always did. They saw the curve of her waist, the rise of her chest as she drew breath, the pale line of skin at her throat. They did not see the woman beneath the dress. They did not see the girl who once played piano in a house with tall white columns in Missouri. They did not see the night she ran west with nothing but a train ticket and a new name. Clara never looked directly at them. She fixed her eyes on a crack in the far wall just above their heads. It was easier that way. When the song ended, a few coins landed at her feet. A man whistled. Another shouted something crude. She dipped her head once, stepped off the stage, and slipped behind the curtain. At the bar sat Luke Callahan. He had ridden into town that afternoon with 20 head of cattle and a tired gray horse. He was broad through the shoulders, sun-browned and quiet. A scar cut across his jaw, like a pale reminder of something he did not speak about. His blue eyes were distant, as if always watching a horizon no one else could see. He had buried his wife 3 years ago. Buried his infant daughter 6 days after that. Since then, he had lived like a man walking through smoke, never stopping long enough for anything to matter. He had not meant to notice the singer, but he had. There was something in her voice that felt too familiar, something raw and unguarded. It made him uncomfortable. It made him listen. He poured another whiskey and told himself he did not care. Behind the saloon, in the narrow alley that smelled of spilled beer and old regret, Clara leaned against the brick wall and closed her eyes. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She heard footsteps behind her. Roy Dalton stepped into the dim lantern light. Roy owned the Silver Spur. He was a heavy man with small, sharp eyes and a smile that never reached them. 5 years ago, he had found Clara sick and hungry in Dodge City. He liked to call it a rescue. He liked to remind her that everything she had now belonged to him. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said softly. Clara opened her eyes. "I sang the song you asked for." You spoke back to a paying man. "He grabbed Molly." Roy's expression hardened. "That ain't your concern." He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her. His hand came up fast, striking her cheek with a sharp crack that echoed off the brick. Clara's head snapped to the side, but she did not cry out. From the alley entrance came a low voice. "Get your hands off her." Roy turned. Luke Callahan stood there, still as stone, hat low over his eyes. "This don't concern you," Roy said. "It does now." Roy gave a short laugh and snapped his fingers. A large man stepped from the shadows, thick arms and broken nose, hired muscle with no questions. Luke did not hesitate. The fight was quick and brutal. Fists collided with bone. Luke took a hard blow to the ribs, but drove his shoulder into the bigger man's chest, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. The hired thug fell with a groan and did not rise. Roy backed away, fury flashing in his eyes. "You just made a mistake, cowboy." Luke did not answer. He held Roy's stare until the man finally retreated into the saloon. Silence settled in the alley. Clara touched her cheek, already swelling. She looked at Luke as if seeing him for the first time. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. Probably not. She studied his bruised knuckles, the way he stood slightly off balance from the hit he had taken. Something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Something reckless. "Come inside," she said quietly. "You're bleeding." In a small storage room behind the stage, she cleaned his split knuckles with whiskey. He flinched but did not pull away. Their hands brushed in the dim lantern light. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. "You're not like the others," she said at last. Luke let out a slow breath. "Don't be so sure." Later that night, in the quiet of the livery stable, Clara found him again. The moonlight filtered through gaps in the wood, painting silver lines across his face. She stepped close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. "I'm tired of being looked at," she whispered. "I want to be seen." Before he could answer, she rose onto her toes and kissed him. It was not gentle. It was desperate. Hungry. Years of loneliness colliding in one reckless moment. He froze. Her hand slid up his chest, trembling but determined. She took his hand and placed it high against her chest, just below her throat, where her heart pounded wildly. Her voice broke into a whisper. "No one's ever kissed me there." Luke felt it then, the frantic beat under his palm, the raw fear, the truth, and for the first time in 3 long years, his heart trembled. Luke's hand stayed where she had placed it. He could feel the wild rhythm beneath his palm. Not just a heartbeat, a fight. A woman who had survived too much and refused to break. His own chest tightened. For 3 years, he had lived like a man carved from dry wood. No feeling, no fire, just routine. Ride, trade, sleep, leave before dawn. He had promised himself he would never need anyone again. Needing someone was how you lost them. But Clara was not asking to be needed. She was asking to be seen. He slowly lowered his hand, not because he did not want her, because he did, and that scared him more than any gun. "You're drunk," he said quietly. Her eyes flashed. "I know exactly what I'm doing." She stepped back, humiliation flickering across her face before she masked it with anger. "Go on then," she said. "Be like the rest. Look, but don't touch. Pretend you're better than this place." He shook his head. "That ain't it." "Then what is it?" He did not answer. Because the truth was ugly. The truth was that he had already buried one woman he loved, and he did not know if he could survive burying another. Clara turned away from him. "Tomorrow," she said stiffly, "you'll ride out, and I'll still be here." She left him standing alone in the stable, but Luke did not sleep that night. Before dawn, he saddled his horse. The sky was just beginning to pale. The town quiet and gray. He told himself to ride, leave before this turned into something dangerous. He led his horse past the Silver Spur. Clara was standing on the boardwalk. She had not covered the bruise on her cheek. It bloomed dark against her pale skin. Her arms were folded tightly across her body, but she was not shivering from the cold. She was bracing herself. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes." She nodded once. "That's smart." He did not move. Neither did she. Across the street, two men leaned against a hitching post, watching. One spat tobacco near Clara's boots. "Manson won't like that," the man drawled. "His little songbird flying too close to strangers." Luke's jaw tightened. Clara stepped down from the boardwalk and walked straight past the men without looking at them. Luke followed. They walked beyond the last building, past the abandoned church and the dry creek bed where nothing had grown in years. When they were far enough from town, Clara stopped. "I was married once," she said suddenly. Luke stayed quiet. "My father thought it was a good match. Rich, respectable. He liked the idea of owning things." Her voice did not shake. "My husband liked it too." Luke felt something dark move in his chest. "I ran," she continued. "Thought if I changed my name and went far enough west, the past wouldn't follow." He understood that kind of running. "And did it?" he asked. She looked at him. "No." The wind moved between them. "You think you're the only one with ghosts?" she asked softly. He swallowed. "My wife died of fever," he said. The words felt like gravel in his throat. "My little girl, too." Clara's expression shifted. The anger faded. "That's why you pulled away last night," she said. He did not deny it. Silence stretched. Then hoofbeats shattered it. 3 riders came over the rise. Roy Dalton rode in the center. He wore a thin smile. "Told you that was my property," he called out. "Sheriff's office don't take kindly to thieves." The sheriff rode beside him, uncomfortable but present. "Miss Monroe," the sheriff said, avoiding her eyes. "Roy here claims you stole from him before fleeing." Clara stared at Roy. "You know that's a lie." Roy shrugged. "Then prove it." Luke stepped forward. "You ain't taking her." The sheriff's hand moved toward his pistol. "Easy now." Clara touched Luke's arm. "No," she whispered. "Not like this." She stepped forward herself. "I'll come back," she said calmly. "But I want a proper hearing." Roy's smile thinned. Luke turned to her sharply. "That's a mistake." "No," she said. "Running is the mistake." He saw it then. She was done being chased. The hearing was held that afternoon inside the saloon. The same men who had whistled at her now sat in judgment. Roy spoke first, telling a smooth story about missing cash and betrayal. The crowd murmured. Clara stood alone in the center of the room. When the sheriff finally asked if she had anything to say, she lifted her chin. "My name is Clara Belle Monroe," she began. "And I have never stolen $1 from that man." She spoke plainly, about the so-called rescue, about the conditions, about the bruises. The room shifted. Molly, the young barmaid Roy had grabbed the night before, stood up. "He hits her," Molly said quietly. "I seen it." Another woman nodded. Then another. Roy's face darkened. The sheriff looked uneasy. The crowd no longer sounded certain. Finally, the sheriff cleared his throat. "No evidence of theft," he said. "Claim dismissed." Roy's rage was cold and silent. "This ain't over," he said to Clara before storming out. That night, the town felt different. Not kind, but watching. Luke found Clara alone behind the saloon again. "You should leave," she said without turning. "Why?" Because he won't stop. Luke stepped closer. I ain't running, he said. She looked at him then. Why? She asked again, softer this time. He reached out and brushed his thumb lightly beneath her jaw, careful of the bruise. Because when you said no one ever kissed you there, he said quietly, I realized something. Her breath caught. What? I don't want to be another man who looks at you and sees something to take. He placed his hand gently over her heart again. I want to be the man who stays. Her eyes filled, but did not spill. For the first time since he had known her, Clara did not look guarded. She looked hopeful. And that was far more dangerous. Roy Dalton did not forgive humiliation. He did not forget it either. 2 nights after the hearing, while the town slept under a thin silver moon, flames rose behind the silver spur. Not an accident, not chance. Kerosene burns differently. Clara woke to the smell of smoke before the bells started ringing. She ran barefoot into the street. The back wall of the saloon was already swallowed in fire. Men shouted. Buckets moved in frantic lines. Horses screamed in their stalls. Luke came running from the boarding house, boots half-laced, shirt thrown on crooked. He saw Clara standing frozen, staring at the blaze. Then he saw something else. A second glow. Across the narrow alley behind the saloon stood a small wooden house where Molly and her little brother slept. The flames were climbing toward it. Without thinking, Clara ran. Clara! Luke shouted. She did not stop. Smoke poured from the house windows. The front door was jammed. Clara grabbed a loose crate and smashed the side window with it. Glass shattered inward. She pulled herself through. The heat hit her like a wall. The room was thick with black smoke. She dropped low, crawling. Molly! She coughed. A small voice answered from the corner. Clara found the girl curled beside her younger brother, both shaking with terror. It's all right, Clara said, though her lungs were burning. I've got you. She lifted the boy first, passing him through the broken window where strong hands took him. Luke! He reached back in, eyes wild with fear. Clara! She pushed Molly toward him. Then a beam above her cracked. The sound split the air. Luke lunged forward, grabbing her arm just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind her. He dragged her out, both of them falling into the dirt as sparks rained down. For a moment, they just lay there, coughing, alive. The saloon burned to the ground before dawn. So did Roy Dalton's office in the back. By morning, word spread fast. The sheriff found empty kerosene cans near the stable. Witnesses spoke quietly. Someone had seen Roy leaving late. Someone had seen him arguing with Clara days before. The town had ignored his cruelty for years, but a fire that nearly killed children was harder to overlook. Roy Dalton was arrested before noon. He did not fight. He looked at Clara once as they led him away. There was no triumph in her face, only exhaustion. That afternoon, the people of Redemption did something strange. They thanked her. Molly's mother embraced Clara openly in the street. Men who once watched her like prey tipped their hats with respect. The silver spur was gone. So was Roy's hold on her. For the first time since she had stepped off that train years ago, Clara felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not defiance. Freedom. Luke found her at sunset by the dry creek bed where nothing ever grew. She was sitting on a fallen log, staring at the horizon. You could leave now, she said quietly. Nothing tying you here. He sat beside her. Maybe there is. She looked at him. You don't owe me anything, she said. You didn't rescue me. I walked into that fire myself. I know. Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not strained, just quiet. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I was scared of loving you," he admitted, "because loving someone means losing them someday." Clara swallowed. "And I was scared you only wanted to save me," she said, "because once I didn't need saving, you'd ride away." He turned toward her fully. "I ain't staying because you're broken," he said softly. "I'm staying because you're strong." Her breath trembled. The wind moved gently across the valley, no longer harsh. She stepped closer. This time there was no desperation, no anger, no whiskey courage. She placed his hand against her chest again, right over her heart. It beat steady now, strong. He leaned down slowly, carefully, and pressed his lips to that very spot. Not hungry, not hurried, just certain. Clara closed her eyes. "No one's ever kissed me there," she whispered again. But this time, the words held something new. Not sadness, not fear. Wonder. Luke wrapped his arms around her and held her as the sun slipped below the hills. Redemption Valley. Did not change overnight. The dust still blew. The wind still tested those who stayed. But something had shifted. A singer who once felt owned now walked the streets with her head high. A cowboy who once lived like a ghost now felt his heart beat without flinching. They did not promise forever. They did not speak of fate. They simply chose to stay, to build, to treat. And under a wide western sky, that was more than enough.